Yellow. Greetings. Hi, I'm Kenny Webster. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm here today to share some very sad news with you. In case you have not heard, Rosalynn Carter has died over the weekend. She was a former First Lady, seen here on the screen. 96 years old, married to Jimmy Carter for 77 years. An incredible accomplishment by today's standards. Nobody stays married for that long nowadays. But anyway, First Lady Rosalynn Carter, like a lot of wives of Democrat politicians, was beloved by the media. As we look back at her life, I think it's important to be honest about who she was and weigh in both the pros and the cons. In the book Mugged, Liberal Demagoguery from the 70s to Obama, Ann Coulter tells the story of how Rosalynn was close personal friends with a cult leader, a notable mass murderer, a guy named Rev Jim Jones. Perhaps you've heard of him. He was the leader of the People's Temple. And the story goes a little bit like this. Even though a lot of biographies on Jim Jones and the People's Temple portray him as this right-wing religious leader in the mold of Jerry Falwell, Jones was actually the original left-wing community organizer. He was beloved by Democrat politicians throughout the land. And Jones's People's Temple was a cult. It was filled to the brim with poor black people, though Jones, like so many other jackass liberals wreaking havoc on black people's lives, was himself actually a white person. Now, more than 80% of his followers were black. And according to the most intensive study we have on Jonestown ever conducted, that was the done by the Department of Religious Studies at San Diego State University, the People's Temple was primarily a black community in racial terms and in cultural identity. All right, give me the next slide there, please. So Jimmy Carter's 1976 presidential campaign was groundbreaking for liberal Democrats. And at the time, Rosalynn Carter went to Reverend Jones and his People's Temple of Socialism and appeared on stage with him, an act second in its shamelessness only to the time that she appeared on stage with her husband. Okay, maybe that's a little dramatic, but at any rate, Carter's vice presidential candidate was this guy named Walter Mondale. Walter wrote a letter to Jones saying at the time, knowing of your congregation's deep involvement in the major social and constitutional issues of our country is a great inspiration to me. Walter and Jimmy and Rosalynn, they all really liked this guy, Jim Jones. So based in San Francisco, Jones was embraced by all of the California elite at the time. You had then Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown, former Governor Edmund Brown Jr., Democratic Congressmen Philip and John Burton, and then Assemblyman Willie Brown and San Francisco Mayor George Moscone, who gave Jones a position on the city's housing authority. Imagine that. All right, so moving forward, next slide, please. There we go. Even before the mass suicide down in South America, it was obvious that Jones was crazier than a March hare. He had a newspaper that was actually called the People's Forum, and there's a copy of that. It was written a lot like MSNBC. In it, he predicted a Nazi takeover of America. He warned his followers that fascists were planning concentration camps for black people, and they were going to do to them exactly what the Germans did to the Jews back in the mid-20th century. Of course, he was wrong about that. So with California's liberal political establishment fawning over Reverend Jim Jones, the media mostly left him alone. They didn't bother him or his commune. But then finally, on August 1st of 1977, New West magazine published a major expose on Reverend Jim Jones. It was based on interviews with more than a dozen former members who were willing to speak out on the record in response to very credible allegations of child abuse, sexual abuse, assault, fraud. San Francisco's liberal elites, surprisingly, rallied around Jim Jones. Of course they did, because that's what they always do is rally around psychopathic people. So here we've got Willie Brown. You might know him as the former boyfriend of Kamala Harris, the Democrat mayor and district attorney whom Jones helped get elected, refused to investigate, which is a practice we now refer to as pulling a Merrick Garland. So Willie Brown appeared on stage at the Reverend Jim Jones's temple. He said the attacks on his commune were a measure of its effectiveness. Now, sadly, none of these elected Democrats ever accompanied him down to South America. Okay, maybe that's not sad. Maybe it's for the best. And Jones soon fled with his members to a communist nation in South America. And when he got there, he was a big fan of the Marxist governments of South America. His entry greased with letters of recommendations from First Lady Rosalynn Carter, Vice President Walter Mondale, and even Carter cabinet member Joseph Califano. Among other eminent Democrats, his plan was to create a, quote, experiment in socialism Terrific move, apparently. Those always go really well. And so that's exactly what they did. They traveled down to South America and they began their terrible, horrible experiment. Give me the next slide there, please, if you don't mind. Thank you. Now, after the cult's departure, ex-members and relatives of the members began warning in interviews and newspaper articles and op-eds and writing letters to Jimmy Carter and the State Department that Jones was an insane person and that he was planning this mass suicide. So Carter's own State Department decided to investigate, and they concluded that there was no basis for action, nothing to worry about here. Finally, a Bay Area congressman, a guy named Leo Ryan, seen here on the screen, he went on a fact-finding mission down to South America in November 1978 as he and his entourage were about to board their plane home. Rev Jones and his followers sprayed them with machine gun fire. They were all murdered, killing Ryan and an NBC correspondent named Dan Harris. In all, 5 people were killed, 10 were wounded. It was pretty horrible, but as far as socialist-inspired mass murder goes, maybe that was a relatively low number. Meanwhile, back at the socialist paradise, Rev Jim Jones ordered his followers to commit what was called a revolutionary suicide to protest the conditions of an inhumane world. There's a very creepy audio recording you can find online of this. In that recording, he tells them all to drink a grape drink and die quickly, quickly, quickly. Good knowing you, he tells them. And that's exactly what they did. In all, more than 900 men and women and children died, mostly by drinking a cyanide-laced Flavor-Aid grape drink. It memorialized the popular cultural term, drinking the Kool-Aid. It was never actually Kool-Aid they were drinking. It was Flavor-Aid, but I digress. Cyanide poison causes death. After a very painful screaming, foaming of the mouth takes place. It's a horrible thing. Some of those who were murdered were apparently injected with the poison. Many of them included women and children. Pretty horrible stuff. Jones died of a gunshot wound to the head, interestingly enough, as hundreds of people died in front of him. It's a terribly sad story, and it's absolutely disgusting. But all that being said, never forget, it never would have happened if not for the help of Jimmy Carter, his administration, and lots of prominent, very influential West Coast Democrats. I'm Kenny Webster. Thank you for watching this video. Share this video, like this video, follow me, subscribe to my stuff if you don't mind. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.